There we go. All right. All right. Okay. Are we good? Once upon a time, there were three friends in the ancient civilization of the city of Alexandria, in the very early Christian church. And these three friends were all trying to live the gospel the fullest extent possible. One of the friends decided to take care of the sick and the poor. And that's hard work. The other friend decided to be a peacemaker amidst warring factions in society. And the third friend decided to go off into the desert and be a desert monk. Now, after a rather short period of time, the first two friends started really struggling with their vocation. They were failing in their efforts to stick to their commitment. Their dedication didn't seem to last very long. And they were really struggling with this, and they were confiding in each other about their own failings and how they were giving up. And they decided to go see the third friend, the desert monk, and talk about it. And so they did. They walked off deep into the desert, and they found this third friend who was living in the austerity of the heat and isolation, solitude and silence. And they told him their problems. And the desert monk took a wooden bowl and put it on the ground and started pouring water into it. And he said, I want you to sit around this bowl and look into the water. And after a minute, he said, what do you see? And they said, well, we see the water jostling all around, sloshing about, falling over the edge. And he said, okay, now let's wait a minute. And they waited another few minutes. And then the water became still and quiet. And he said, now what do you see? And they looked into the bowl, and they said, we can now see ourselves. And the desert monk said, that's right. When you escape the chaos of the world, you can finally see yourself. But more importantly, you can see yourself as God sees you. Now, I tell this story because all of us live in the chaos of the modern world. The kids at your school, the parishioners at your church, they all live in this chaotic modern life. Unprecedented chaos, unprecedented anxiety. And we're going to talk in this morning session about what I think are the causes of this epidemic, pandemic of anxiety. And I gave this talk long before COVID. And I contend now that, and I would always say, we have a pandemic of anxiety. Okay, now we have two pandemics. I would contend that the pandemic of anxiety is far worse than COVID, because this is killing souls. Now, I talk about this not because I'm the desert monk. I'm not the desert monk in this story. I am one of the guys who's living in the busy city, even though we escaped the city and live in the country. But I'm one of the guys who continually fails at his vocation, at his commitment, at his resolution. I've turned over so many leaves, I have a forest. And as a father, my wife is expecting our 15th child. One wife, I promise. And one set of twins, so we didn't cheat too many times to get that. Just one set of twins. I know chaos. I know chaos. And I see chaos at home. I see chaos at my business, Tan Books, which you may be familiar with, a Catholic publishing company. I see it in my own life. So when I sat down to write this book, which I'll give to you later today, Still Amidst the Storm, which this talk is derived from, I really wanted to reflect myself on where does this anxiety, stress come from? And it's in every walk of life. And my research, my prayer and reflection, my own experience has given me some lessons that I hope can maybe help you as well. So let's first talk about what some of the symptoms are so that you can see I'm not exaggerating the problem. In the United States, 77% of people regularly experience physical symptoms caused by stress. That's a lot of people. 73% of people regularly experience psychological symptoms caused by stress, which may be even worse. Over 18% of adults suffer from anxiety disorder. Now, when you see disorder, that's something much more severe than just having some symptoms of something. A disorder means you have problems operating in your day-to-day life. So statistically, 18% of you are dealing with anxiety. 18% of your family are dealing with a disorder, something that's so severe it's hard to get out of bed and go function on a day-to-day basis. It takes extreme grit and perseverance to just get through the day. Worse than that, over 25% of children suffer from anxiety disorder. 25%. Children are supposed to be stress-free. They're supposed to live a life of joy and fun and love. Stress is for us, if it's for anybody. It's not for the kids that go to this Catholic school, but it's there like a pandemic. On a daily basis, people watch 5 hours of TV a day. This is pre-COVID numbers. I have researched post-COVID, and the statistics aren't out yet. It's far worse now. So this is pre-COVID. 5 hours a day of TV. I think Netflix and Amazon, I meet a lot of people that say, I don't watch TV. Okay, but you binge watch Netflix on your computer. Come on. Come on. 75 minutes on their smartphone, that is a serious understatement because they're defining that as just talking on the phone. This is not a phone. This is a computer in your pocket. So that's an understatement. 62 minutes listening to the radio, that's just in the car. That's just driving in the car. The average person will spend 5.5 years on social media during their lifetime. 5.5 years. Think about the money you spend to help someone live an extra 5 years. You know, that aging parent, or when you get old and decrepit, which you will. How much effort you'll go through to live an extra 5 years just to do a few more things in your life that you didn't get to do, a few more conversations you didn't have. You just wasted it on social media. So you can have it right there. Just stop social media. The extreme teenager, so not the average teenager, but the teenagers on the far end of the spectrum, spend 9 hours a day on social media. How's that possible? You think about that. I didn't make this up. That's a full-time job. That's a full-time job. This is, you know what that sounds? That sounds like torture. That sounds like, and the irony is that it's called social. It's complete and utter isolation. It's devastating loneliness. Devastating loneliness. And it's called social. The devil controls our language. He says that you have 5,000 friends when you don't have a single one. He calls it social media when it's isolation. shutting out the world. Police can't even get eyewitness reports in public crimes because nobody saw them, because their face is stuck on the smartphone. So, this is dangerous stuff. So my contention is that this is the cause, or at least a substantial cause, maybe not the only cause, but a substantial cause to the anxiety that the statistics are showing exist. And even if this appears to be a wonderful faith or community here, parish and school. So I'm not throwing stones. I'm talking from personal experience. This is the pot calling the kettle black. When I speak to you, I'm saying all of us. But even if this is an exceptional community, the problem, maybe not to this extent, but the kids in your school, they still have these problems to some degree that is substantially more than you did when you were their age, or their grandparents when they were their age. This is a new dynamic on planet Earth that we have to grapple with. Now, what about those teens who text or do social media 9 hours a day? Well, those same kids are texting constantly. So let's take excessive texters, okay? The kids who are on the far end. Does it have an impact? Well, it's those same kids that are 40% more likely to smoke. They're 100% more likely to drink alcohol. But actually, the most devastating here, I think, and the most telling is the 55% more likely to get into fights. It's this anger, this build-up, this tension, and it's that volcanic eruption where they go nuclear and they get in a fight. I think that's just letting that anxiety and stress out at unprecedented levels. So I've set the stage a little bit to show you the severity of the problem. And this is a perfect topic for orientation day, orientation retreat for a school and parish community. Because I don't care what particular big issues this school or parish are dealing with, this is one of them. Like, this is one of the top ones. Every teacher in here has got to know that, especially with the older kids, even the younger kids. I'm sure every year it's getting younger and younger. So I think this is a perfect time, because what do we desire at the school? You folks are coming together here because you desire peace and tranquility with the students and the families. And there is an enemy in this world against that, and it's a lot of this digitization of life, this virtual lifestyle. So I think this is a perfect topic for a community of faith, particularly one dealing with children. The job you have is one of the most important jobs in the world, and there's this elephant in the room that's making it very difficult to raise our children in a peaceful and tranquil manner. So what you see here is a pyramid that I propose as my remedy to the problem of anxiety, the problem of digitization, the problem of stress in our lives. And it is this: first, living in the present moment at the bottom part of the pyramid. You must live in the present moment. Now, you're going to see, I'm not saying to burn all the cell phones. I'm not proposing that. I'm trying to provide some very general principles in which we proactively seek serenity and peace at home, at school, at church. And I think that this is the tripartite recipe, the ingredients to obtain that. So the first is living in the present moment, and we're going to talk about that. Why? Because God, who's the only source of peace, is the eternal now. As you'll see, we're going to talk about God is not present in the future or the past. He's just the eternal now, the present moment. And so much of our stress and anxiety come from going to the past or the future. And we're going to talk about that. Secondly, we're going to talk about silence. We live in the noisiest civilization of all time. And we're going to talk about interior and exterior silence. Our kids need it badly. They need silence. Quiet time. We all need quiet time, not just the kindergartners. I need quiet time. I really need quiet time. And we don't get it anymore because things are dinging at us all the time. And in fact, if you forced quiet time on teenagers too much, they would have withdrawal symptoms just like a drug addict has. And I'm not exaggerating. That shows there's a problem. You want to see if they're addicted, take it away from them, see what happens. It's serious business. The third part is stillness. So if you live in the present moment and you embrace silence, what happens is your life physically slows down and you become more still as opposed to the hamster on the wheel. And interiorly, more importantly, you have a certain stillness of heart. Scripture says, be still and know that I'm God. So we're going to move on now and start with the foundational principle, even beneath the present moment. The scripture passage that I based my work on was this passage, and I'm just going to read it to you. It's from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 4. And a great storm of wind arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But he, Jesus, was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care if we perish? And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, Why are you afraid? Have you no faith? And they were filled with awe and said to one another, Who then is this, that even the wind and sea obey him? I think the answer to everything I'm saying is right in that passage. I've read that passage now, I don't know, probably literally 100 times at this point. As I was writing that book, every time I sat down to start typing, I read that passage. So our answers are within that. We are scared, we are stressed, we feel like Jesus right there. And I feel very weird walking in front of him without genuflecting every time I walk by. So I'm sure he accepts my internal genuflect as I walk right by him. But we feel like he's asleep and not paying attention to our crisis that we have, whatever that is. It's like he's asleep in the boat. But then he alone can stand up and say, Peace, be still. But I ask you, who are you in this scripture passage for the rest of your life? Every time you hear this passage, I'd like you to ask yourself, who are you? Are you the apostles rowing like crazy? Are you a rower and you're going to fight those waves, exerting all of your energy? Are you the water crashing into the boat, into someone else's boat? Are you like a wrecking ball in someone else's life? Are you the boat and have lots of people piled into your life, seeking refuge, and the world is banging up against you? Are you fragile? Are you the sails? See, there's a tear in that sail. Are you fragile and have rips all throughout you, and at any moment could break apart? Maybe you're all of those, but you're not Jesus. You're not Jesus in this. So I'd encourage you to think, who are you in your life, with your loved ones, with your students, with your colleagues, with your family? Please go back home tonight or whatever and read Mark chapter 4, Mark chapter 4, Mark chapter 4, and ask God, who are you in this? It's helped me. All right. So the present moment. Now we're going to talk about that first part of the pyramid. Present moment. This is the Garden of Eden. And I think before sin, man and woman were perfect. They were perfectly happy. And one of the things that was happening in the Garden of Eden was that they were living with God in the eternal now. It was it was this state of perfect happiness of the present moment. And as I was looking at this, thinking about your community, I was thinking, they had no exams. They had no papers to grade. They didn't worry about 401k contributions. They had no dress code. So it was a perfect community, perfectly content. And you've noticed in your own life where time flies and you're having fun or you're concentrating and time flies. That's what living in the present moment is. That's contemplation, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But we've all heard the Garden of Eden story countless times. So I'm going to propose a new way of looking at it. The devil enters the Garden of Eden and he goes to the woman. And what does he say to her? He says, if you eat of this fruit, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God. Oh, there's grammar teachers, phonics teachers in here. I hope you notice the future tense. Will be. Your eyes will be opened. You will be like God. And I think prior to that, she never thought about future tense. She lived in the present moment. The devil introduced the concept of there's something in the future that you don't have right now. Woman, you're not good enough as you are. We're going to make you better. God's hiding something from you. He doesn't want you to have his knowledge. There's something better for you on the other side. So the devil introduced the concept of the future, and it pulled the woman and the man out of the present moment. So now we're going to talk about the past and the future. Because when you leave the present moment, where do you go? First, we'll talk about the past. Now, I'll just speak from personal experience. I suspect a lot of you can relate. But when you dwell in the past and you live in the past, usually it's not just filled with gratitude about how perfect everything was. Usually, there's a lot of resentment. There's other things, but resentment's a major component. And in my own life, in my experience with others, leading others, raising others, being married to others, I see that resentment is the driving force when we live in the past. What does resentment mean? Maybe there's a Latin teacher here. Sentire, to feel. So resentment means to refeel. By the way, if you ever want to give a talk to anyone, just pick a Latin word and do the etymology, and you got a great talk every time. But to refeel. Isn't that interesting? If you have pain, if you get a paper cut today at work, and then a week from now, you remember it, and so in order to remember it, you went and gave yourself another paper cut just so you could re-feel it. How foolish. But that's what we do with resentment. We are re-feeling those pains. Now, I'm not saying we completely forget the past. I'm not saying we ignore it like it never happened. But we need to be very cognizant of the fact, are we thinking and remembering the past? Or have we psychologically, spiritually put ourselves into the past and are re-feeling the wounds? And that can be a very dangerous thing. And the devil wants us there because it's not the present moment God, the eternal now. So the future. Everyone here knows C.S. Lewis? And when I give talks and say, who is C.S. Lewis? They always talk about Narnia. Narnia was the least of his concerns, and it's the most popular of his writings. But I hope you know the screw tape letters. The screw tape letters are the devils communicating with each other, a senior devil teaching a younger devil how to tempt you and your children. It's a fascinating little book. But here, the older demon is talking to the younger demon about the present moment and the past and the future. So just so you know, I'm not making this stuff up. We can rely on C.S. Lewis as an authority. The older demon says, our business is to get them, you humans, away from the eternal and from the present moment. With this in view, we sometimes tempt a human to live in the past. So sometimes the devil tempts us to live in the past. It is far better to make them live in the future. Why? The future is the most completely temporal part of time. For the past is frozen and no longer flows. It's over. It's done. And the present is all lit up with eternal rays. Why? That's because God's there. Hence, nearly all vices are rooted in the future. We want a whole race of mankind perpetually in pursuit of the rainbow's end. The devil wants us always looking for the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's the future, the future, the future. Plan this, plan that. Worry about this, worry about that. What's going to happen in retirement? Are my kids going to be okay? How's my job going to be in 5 years? What's going to happen with the budget? It can go on and on and on. And I get it. I get it. Last week, my 19-year-old and a friend flew out to Sawtooth National Forest and disappeared into the depths of a national forest completely alone for 5 nights and 6 days. I was worrying, okay? I'm not heartless. I had to tell myself, okay, I cannot get worried for 6 days. I can't allow myself to do this because it's not going to do me any good. But the devil certainly would have wanted me to worry about that and that taint my, to use that good thing, parental love, paternal love, to ruin everything else during that week. The devil is a master at this. He's a master strategist. He takes your legitimate concerns and he infects them with unholy anxiety. That's what he does. He's a master at it. So how do you live in the present moment? And here I'm going to get more practical about the present moment. So there's a great book called Deep Work. I suggest everybody read it. I talk to a lot of business executives, but anybody in a professional organization, administration, faculty, staff, whatever it is, you have work to get done. And you live on the hamster wheel and it never feels done. It never feels complete. I do not think previous generations had the problem like we do. We live in a society of perpetual distraction, which is pulling you usually into the future. A long inbox, lots of emails, lots of texts, lots of social media dings, logistics for soccer practice tonight. Got to pay the bills tonight when I get home. And I got to watch my Netflix. You got a million things to get done. And those things are bombarding you when you're at work trying to do your job. And they're interfering with deep work. And so what we have is a society now of people who have never done deep work. They've only done shallow work. Shallow work. Okay? Another book written by the same author, he did the statistics and he found that the average person at work who's checking email throughout the day switches topics 85 times in his work day. 85 times. So when I was thinking about preparing this for you folks, dealing with students, I want you to imagine that the principal, is there a principal in here? That principal, he tells us, the way we're going to educate the kids this year is we're going to do science for 3 minutes, and then math for 3 minutes, and then grammar for 3 minutes, and then music for 3 minutes, and then PE for 3 minutes, and Spanish for 3 minutes, and we're going to go back to math and science, and we're going to switch subjects 85 times during the day. Now, what would you think of that recommendation? Where did you come from, man? Like, this is crazy. But that's neurologically is what's happening when you check email 85 times a day or texting or social media You're working on something, you check the email real quick, and then your husband texts you for a second, and then your teenager texts you something, and then you get TikTok vibrating or whatever people are doing. Instagram, we're going to look through Instagram real quick on our lunch break. You're switching subjects 85 times a day. Your brain can't do that. It's not doing it. And so what I submit to you is that if you can create distraction-free work zones for yourself and your students here and at home, then you have an incredible competitive advantage over your peers. It's not software engineers that are going to control the world in the future, I promise you. It's the people who know how to concentrate. That's it. Because that's a lost art. You don't have to be a classicist anymore to be considered educated. And whether you're a software programmer or a classicist, now it's just, are you able to function? And I have seen in my professional endeavors, hiring young people, hiring old people, it is a much bigger problem with the younger people we hire. I hire a lot of people out of college, Their ability to concentrate is gone. It's gone. Middle-aged people are suffering with it too because they've had Facebook for how many years now? 15 years? I don't know, whenever that thing started. So if you want to give your students and your children a competitive advantage, teach them how to block out distractions, to do their homework or study hall or whatever it is, turn off the electronic devices, set 30-minute, 45-minute, 1 hour, whatever it is, and say, we're not moving. We're not changing subjects. We're not focusing on anything else. We're not talking for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever you pick. Train them to do that. It is better than any technical skill they'll learn. Because if they can do that, they can go learn any technical skill down the road that they want to. I promise you. The ability to focus is gone. Why am I talking about that? Because that's living in the present moment. That's where all the good stuff happens. It's where God is theologically. It's where the deepest relationship between man and woman happen. A husband and wife who are having a lot of conflict, it's usually because they're not stopping and focusing and doing deep work with each other on whatever that is. It's distraction. It's distraction universe that you live in. So think about that 85 times. Your brain was not created by God to do that. Your brain was created to focus deeply and then move to the next task and focus deeply and move to the next task and focus deeply. Multitasking is a real danger to your children, and we don't even think about it because it's become so second nature. It creates the anxiety that we're talking about. Now, when you live in, and this is fun, we're going to have fun for a second. When you live in deep work, when you live in the present moment and you're really working deeply on creating a budget or creating a lesson plan or sitting there one-on-one teaching a student or whatever it may be, whenever you're really trying to solve a problem, whether you're trying to get information into a little mind, whatever that deepness is, usually the question comes up of, well, why? Why? We all love those questions from little kids. Why? Why? You know, Christ said we must be like these little ones. And I have found the people at work who rise to the top and really earn their keep are the ones that ask the question why, repeatedly, until they get to the core, to the root, to the essence, to the substance of the issue. And we've lost this ability because you're not going to ask why multiple times when you're like a baby squirrel that loses attention. ADD, just all over the place, cannot focus. You don't ask questions why, so you don't get to the root of whatever the issue is. So again, living in the present moment with God helps you think better and get to the essence of something. So I love this. The 5 whys, and hopefully you'll always remember this, the 5 whys. The Jefferson Memorial was deteriorating. The whitewash was coming off constantly. And so somebody said, well, why? Why are we watching it? Why is it coming off? Why is it always, well, we watch it too much. Well, why do we wash it so much? Well, because we have excessive bird droppings. They put up the little spikes everywhere. Didn't work. Birds kept pooping on it. Why? Why are they pooping on it? Well, because there's a lot of spiders. Why are there so many spiders? Why do spiders like the Jefferson Memorial? Well, they like it because there's gnats there. Well, why are there so many gnats? Because they keep the lights on all the time. So, you can live in distraction zone and just keep paying people to wash the Jefferson Memorial, or you can focus in the present moment and go deeper and look for the cause and the next cause and the next cause till you get back to the primal cause, that first cause. Why is this happening? Oh, the lights are always on. And so the fix is not having a full-time painting staff on your team. It's just turn the darn lights off. They just started turning the lights off during the day and from like 1 in the morning until whenever they turned it back on. And it solved the problem. Why do I love this so much? Because I think 80 or 90% of our problems have such a simple solution like that. And we're whitewashing the problems over and over and over again. And all we need to do is turn off the lights. But you don't find that primary cause unless you live in the present moment and think deeply. So I hope you're seeing how this connects and comes together. We don't solve deep problems living in the future and the past with distractions. And if you want your kids to be able to solve deep problems in their own life, they need to learn how to live in that present moment. Now, who's heard of Pareto's principle? 80-20 rule, how about that? Raise your hands if you've heard the 80-20 rule. This is a natural law principle that governs the universe. And I mean that God created the laws of gravity, all kinds of things, and then he created this, and it governs everything. It's the 80-20 rule. And what it means is that 80% of the results in life come from 20% of the actions. Think cause and effect. 20% of our causes produce 80% of the effects. This is true. I can relate it to your school, and the experienced administration and faculty will know it's true like that. 20% of your students cause 80% of your problems. Okay? 20% of the great students produce 80% of the vibrant community that you have. And higher level administration would tell you 20% of the teachers cause 80% of the problems. We won't talk about that part. But it's everywhere. It's everywhere. 20% of my kids cause 80% of my problems. If I take all the stupid things I do towards my wife and list them on a board, say I take 10. Let's just say I stop at 10. I take them, list them all out. If I just stop doing 2 of them, a certain 2, not just any 2, but if I saw that 2 of them are the main problems, I just stopped doing 2 of those, I solved 80% of my marriage problems. I have very few marriage problems. Got a great marriage. I'm just saying. Whatever issue you're dealing with in life, a few things are producing the big result, good or bad. 20% of the people in America cause 80% of the medical insurance problems, the medical care industry. 20% of drivers produce 80% of the wrecks on the street. All of this is true. If you take 100 goldfish, you build a pond out there, and you throw them in there, and you have 100 fish that are exactly the same size, you come back in a year or two, 20% of the fish are eating 80% of the food. And they're all different sizes. It's incredible. So why am I talking about Pareto's principle, the 80-20 rule? Because again, when we learn how to live in the present moment and focus deeply, really deeply, what happens is that we start finding the true causes of problems, the true causes of our kids' distress, the true causes of our colleague disputes. You go into deep work. You ask deep questions of why is this happening? Why is this happening? You learn how to say, you know what? That 80% is superfluous. Here's the 20% that we need to focus on. Here's the 20% good stuff we need to focus on. Here's the 20% bad stuff that we need to cut out. It's all about learning how to live in the present moment so that you can accept reality as it is and not be distracted away from it, which is what the modern world does. Again, a little bit more about living in the present moment. Christ himself said, "Do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Let today's own trouble be sufficient for the day." That's Jesus talking, not me. He knew that anxiety was a problem even back then. And which one of you, by being anxious, can add 1 cubit to his span of life? Anxiety doesn't help. He's telling us here to not worry about the future. Don't live in the past. Live in the present moment with him. And that solves so much of our problems. The only way to do that is to create these distraction-free zones and to focus on the things that are most important. All right, so that was the present moment. We're going to move on. Actually, silence. I sort of enjoy this topic a little bit more. It's a little bit easier to grasp. We live in the noisiest civilization of all time. Everything's dinging at us. In fact, when we have a little bit of silence in the car, it's disconcerting. You feel a little off. You don't really know what to think or say or do. You just start hitting the XM radio button just to have some noise. I hear people listen to the radio in the shower just because they can't have silence. If you're one of those, you need help. I mean, that's not a healthy thing. We're supposed to be comfortable in our own skin, and we're not. Our children don't experience silence. And so I don't know exactly how you create that in a classroom, but wherever you can show kids the beauty of silence is a wonderful thing. Their life is loud. Their life is really loud. No, I'm not asking them to go be hermits in the desert, but they need some silence in their life. And by the way, silence is not just the absence of sound. When I was working on this book, I had to grapple with silence just something negative, like the lack of something? Not really. If you think about your favorite song or your favorite movie, you'll probably find that the moments of silence are like the apex. The silence is where some of the greatest stuff happens. It's where there's a climax or there's anticipation. It's something very powerful. Think about 2 lovebirds falling in love and they're staring in each other's eyes. They're probably not rambling. They're in this silence. Oh, that's not just the lack of something, right? 2 people falling in love, staring, gazing into each other's eyes. That's a active, affirmative existence of something right there. It's not just the lack of noise. So silence is more than just the lack of noise. It's something proactively wonderful. And the saints all talk about how God speaks through the silence. I'm not a saint, so I haven't heard that. I'm waiting for my burning bush, but haven't gotten it yet. All right, so there was a Carmelite nun right about the same time as St. Teresa of Lisieux. And her name was Sister Marie Aimée de Jesus. And she wrote a little tiny little book. It's more like a pamphlet on the 12 degrees of silence. And she talked about different forms of silence. And so I'm just going to give you a couple of them because when I'm talking about silence, again, I don't mean just the lack of noise. So we do have silence in words, right? Here I am talking lots about silence. But silence of words, we need to have less words in our life. But words are verbal, words are texting and social media posts, tweets, they're emails. There are all these words that come at us. We have too many words. We need less words. We need a whole lot less words. It's interesting that the English language now is like smaller than it's ever been. It used to, the vocabulary, the dictionary, the use of words used to be much, much bigger. We're losing our lexicon, our usable lexicon, and yet we say more than ever before. So we're saying more and more about less and less with less and less words. It's all backwards. We should have a bigger vocabulary and say less words. But silence of the imagination. So imagination's a beautiful thing. We wouldn't have Tolkien, Dickens, Mozart, C.S. Lewis, Dostoevsky. We wouldn't have these Dante. We wouldn't have Shakespeare. We hadn't all these wonderful artists if we didn't have imagination. But imagination goes wrong a lot. So when you imagine something, you're a creator. And how often in your own life do you start imagining a conversation with somebody, or you're reimagining a situation that happened, and you sort of demonize them and martyr yourself, glorify yourself, demonize them? It happens. And when we do that, it's like making somebody out of clay. We're molding that person in our own image, but that's God's job, not ours. So we can really distort the beauty of imagination by playing God and twisting and turning that person in our mind. It's a dangerous thing. So even imagination, which is glorious, it needs to be tempered. And so when you see your imagination running wild, you need to learn how to silence that imagination. That's a form of silence. That's a form of silence. Silence of the memory. Again, going back to the resentment idea, like there's a lot of times where in our memory, we're remembering it in a little different way than it actually happened. Again, we end up glorifying ourselves a lot, or we victimize ourselves and we make the situation worse. So usually memory does not glorify others, it usually glorifies ourselves. So we have to be cognizant of that and just learn to silence it. And we have to help our children do this. I see it all the time with our teenagers or even the younger kids, and they're telling a story about what happened 3 minutes ago. And they will reenact what the sibling did, and they make it 10 times worse than it actually was, right? He hit me. Well, show me how he hit you. And then he demonstrates like a knockout blow, and it wasn't. It was a push, It was a push. Or when it's the reverse, and they really did sock him good, and you challenge that kid, and the kid says, I just did this. No, if you're a parent, you get it. So we have to teach our kids, no, don't just lie. No. Be careful. Your memory is playing tricks on you. See, you're a fallen creature, and part of your sinful nature leads your memory to play tricks on you. So memory can be dangerous, and we have to silence that memory sometimes. And silence of self-love. I mean, that's kind of obvious, but self-love can be, little kids, do I get the front seat? I mean, that's like World War III every day. Who gets to sit in what seat? It's incredible. I mean, how is it that two people can sit next to each other and draw blood? I don't understand. Just sit still. We're just driving to the grocery store. How did this happen? But you have to teach them, you have to sacrifice. You have to silence your self-love. This self-preservation instinct that has been distorted by sin, you must learn how to carry your cross and suffer for the other person. You must learn to suffer. Here, I'm not just enrolling you in Sacred Heart Elementary School. I am enrolling you in the school of Jesus Christ crucified. You have to learn to pick up your cross and carry it, little boy, little girl. Yeah, you're 5, and you have to learn to suffer. And I'm going to teach you to suffer because I love you. So you give up the seat, not because this person deserves it, but because you need to learn to suffer. So silencing that self-love. I mean, of all the things you could teach the students here this year, if they learned one thing about how to sacrifice for another person, I'm sorry, phonics, math, science, it's more valuable because one gets them to heaven. So, and I'm sure you guys do that. But these are things, as a parent, I really try to say, how do I teach my children? You got to be creative and find ways to do this with your children. It's not easy. I can't give you a rule book on how to do it. But if you're seeking ways to teach children to silence imagination or memory or self-love, to learn how to suffer, to learn how to have interior silence, to learn to be still, the opportunity presents itself all the time. All right, next. So now we've talked about present moment, we've talked about silence. Lastly, we're going to talk about stillness, and this is the shortest part. But I see this as sort of the culmination of living in the present moment with silence and stillness. I mean, just think about the last 48 hours of your life. You know, how many times have you gotten in and out of the car? How many times have you picked up your cell phone? You know, how many times have you, I mean, it's a chaotic world. We are hamsters on the wheel, just spinning, 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 spinning. And we think that it's all necessary. And I get it. I get it. I mean, I don't know why, but for some reason, we have to go to the grocery store like once a day. And it's not just because we've got 15 kids, but we forgot this, we forgot that. Oh, you know, I need creamer with my coffee. I can't just have coffee. You know, it's a nightmare of the hamster wheel. So finding stillness goes a long, long way. And in fact, if you think about the people that you're most attracted to in life, they're people that are very content, that don't have to be this busybody. They're very content, comfortable in their own skin. And you admire those people. At least I do. So here's my contention, that all of this emphasis in life about productivity, efficiency, all of this progress obsession is actually a form of sloth. Sloth is the animal, sloth is the sin. That's how I heard it once. I hope that's right. Productivity. We are obsessed with progress. We are obsessed with getting these students at this school into Harvard a little bit more than heaven. We're obsessed with we have to improve. Our kids need to be the all-American kid, great athlete, a musician, speak multiple languages, whatever. I mean, all this progress, progress, progress. It's an obsession with parents, especially modern parents, who essentially worship their children. There isn't, if you have 15, you stop doing that because you're like, well, I can't do hardly anything with any of them anyway. We have to just focus on a few things. But dude, seriously, I mean, having a lot of kids, it really helped me say, okay, I cannot treat the 12th kid the same way as I did the first. I just can't. He's not doing physical training to be a travel baseball player. It's not happening. I can't do it with all my kids. And so you end up saying, well, what do you focus on? What do you focus on? So Thomas Aquinas defined sloth as a sorrow for spiritual goods, a sluggishness of the mind which neglects to begin good. So just you can envision, sloth is not just a couch potato, okay? It's a better image. So don't think of the fat guy with the Cheetos watching TV. It's not that. I think the sloth today is the person who's go, 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 go. And then when it comes time to pray a family rosary, they go, oh, we don't have to do that. Oh, but you have to get them to travel soccer. Oh, and you have to get them to piano lessons. Oh, and you have to do all of these things, and you're gonna get that perfect SAT score. You're gonna get that. But we have to go to mass. All right, get in the car. All right, yeah, maybe you shouldn't wear flip-flops. You know, just put on some tennis shoes, okay? Sloth. Because we have energy for everything else except for God. That's sloth. That's the sin of sloth. And it needs to go into the confession box and be confessed a lot. Because we have this sorrow, this sadness, where you don't get excited, we don't feel good about the things of God. We're too busy doing everything else. So the devil has taken all of this energy and productivity in our modern society and infected it. Now, this is the Trojan horse. Probably study the Odyssey somewhere in this community. I don't know how high the grade levels go. The kids are probably somewhat familiar with the story of the Trojan horse. And so the Greeks, mastermind Odysseus, slides the Trojan, actually, I'm sorry, the Trojan horse really isn't in the Odyssey. It is, but it's in the Iliad much more so. It's full blown in the Iliad by Homer. But Odysseus creates the Trojan horse as a gift to the Trojan gods. And so they welcome it into the city of Troy. But sitting in the belly of the Trojan horse are the Greek warriors. And at night they descend from the belly, they slaughter the people of Troy. They actually commit great sacrilege, killing people on the altar to their gods. They profane everything in the city of Troy. They're grotesque, and the great city of Troy falls. And it all went through the belly of the Trojan horse. The productivity, the obsession with movement, transactions, our obsession in our modern life of get more done, pile on more into my life, pile on more, is a Trojan horse. And sloth, the sin of sloth, is sitting in the belly. It's sitting in the belly. We're raising our children to figure out how to be like time management masters. Well, I'm here to tell you, as somebody who has read almost all of the best-selling time management books, I've been obsessed with that. And I'm telling you, they're all bunk. They're all wrong. The trick to time management is to just do less. That's the answer. You cannot cram 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag. And when you do try to keep cramming more into your life, more into your kid's life, more into your smartphone, more into your car, more onto your TV screens, more into your daily calendars, sloth is the inevitable result, where you don't have energy left for God. That is the Trojan horse of today. That is where anxiety comes from. The anxiety of today comes from our inability to be in the present moment, in silence, and stillness with God. That's where the anxiety comes from. Now I'm going to conclude. Sorry, one more. I'm going to conclude with the last 2 pages of this little book. And you deal with lots of little kids here. So I'm hoping you can appreciate this. Sometimes when I give this talk, I think people look at it and say, I don't get it. I hope you get it. So this last chapter, Death by Komodo Dragon. What in the world could that be about? Subtitle of the chapter, Don't Be So Busy as to Miss Life's Greatest Moments. So if you have kids at home, you can think about your own kids here. But you don't have to. You have these glorious little creatures here. I haven't seen any of them, but I know they're glorious just because they're innocent and pure, and they're wonderful. And they're right there. And you're blessed to come and deal with them. Most people don't get to do that. So first, a little passage from Scripture. See that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I tell you that in heaven their angels always behold the face of my Father who is in heaven. So these little ones are really sacred. Okay, here's my short little reflection. It's a funny thing to write a book about the present moment in a house full of children. How many paragraphs have been interrupted? How many times have I lost focus when writing about focus? I have developed a knack for writing about silence with screaming children around me. The humor of it lightens my spirit and makes my sentences looser and more agile. One time when I was writing on stillness, my 8-year-old, Paul, sat next to me organizing his poker chips. Yes, he plays poker. Very good at it, too. He started telling me about how he will get a pocket knife when he turns 9. I stopped typing, pulled my hands away, looked into his eyes, and listened to him for about 20 seconds. I responded with some goofy reply about how he can now live in the woods and hunt for his own food. I had been still for him, and so I thought I could return to my work. The real work, however, had just begun, for Paul was to launch into a brilliant monologue. Actually, no, Dad, I can't survive in the woods alone. The knife isn't sharp enough. The animals will get away. And by the way, I love these detours kids take. And by the way, Komodo dragons can be 10 feet long. If a deer gets bit by a Komodo dragon, there's no turning back. It will go through 5 stages of death. 1, it gets tired. 2, it lays down. 3, it then is nearly dead. 4, its heart starts to stop. 5, then its heart stops and it is finally dead. So, Dad, I can't survive in the woods with a pocket knife. Now, if I had been typing while he said all that, I would have missed that incredible analysis. My life, and I hope yours, is enriched for knowing the 5 stages of death by Komodo dragon. Parents or teachers have a treasure trove of these brilliant insights from their children. But we must stop and listen. We must put the cell phone down. We must put email away. We must fold our hands and look them square in the eye. We must take in every second of this great privilege to be a parent. I have but one life to live. I must live in the present moment with silence and with stillness. For one day, I will get tired. 2, I will lie down. I will be nearly dead. My heart will begin to stop. And then, in God's good time, my heart will stop and I will be dead. And by God's grace, I will finally escape the storm and enter into the eternal present moment. I hope that means something to you. As teachers and faculty of a faith community, it means a lot to me. Thank you very much.